Since 2007, one man has dared to expose the sinister power players on all sides of the phony political spectrum. Armed with over 30 years of research knowledge of the paranormal, government conspiracies, geopolitics, secret and ancient societies, the esoteric arts, and much more. One man's quest for knowledge has become a mission for the enlightenment of all people. Broadcasting from the conspiracy ground zero of Dallas, Texas, this is The Global Reality with your host, Josh Reeves.
Yes, indeed. Welcome to another edition of the broadcast. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. It is Thursday, October 31st, 2019, Halloween. Spooky Halloween, All Hallows Eve. Yes, it is the Global Reality Halloween edition. Very, very spooky. Yes, indeed. That's all I got for you. I don't got anything spookier than that. Sorry. Only I got spookier than that is goddamn news and all these other crazy fucking stories. And, you know, I don't know. Listen, I used to be a big hardcore horror fan when I was a teenager and stuff, but I don't know, man. It just doesn't do it for me anymore. I think I'm too desensitized by all this other shit. I gotta admit, I'm very desensitized. This shit, I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know if I've ever even talked about this before, but it's kind of like, you know, somebody that's been in the military for a long time, or someone that's been a police officer, or a homicide detective, or, you know, somebody that's worked in a morgue. I don't know. But I can tell you, during the time period in which since I've been doing the show, and I'm day in and day out looking at all this pure evil. I mean, there's just no other way to really put a cap on all of this stuff, because it's all just really coming from a place of pure evil. And I don't know. You know, I feel like I've seen too much at this point. Nothing gets to me anymore. Like I can sit there and watch those videos of people, you know, like the other night when that shooting happened, the shooting broke out. There's videos coming up and there's people, I mean, that wasn't fucking fake. That was real shit. It was coming in almost in real time. And, later on, I was like, God damn. I wasn't even shook looking at that. There's people talking about how horrific it was and how people needed to be banned and not be uploading that shit. You know what? I completely disagree with that. I disagree with all that shit. And I think that's why they continue to get away with some of these phony shootings and whatnot. I think we need to see that. I think as a community, as humans, I think them shielding that stuff and not showing the footage of that stuff and saying, oh, it's out of respect to this bullshit. Since when do these people had respect for us for anything? And then some people get killed and all of a sudden they want to start talking about they got respect. Fuck you. Fuck you. Go eat eat two dicks while you're at it. Why eat one when you can eat two at the same time? Go eat fucking two dicks. I'm not buying that shit. Come on. No, I'm sorry. If you disagree with me, that's your prerogative. It's my prerogative to say, I think what's continuing to cause these horrific things like shootings and murders is the fact that people are being shielded from the carnage and the aftermath. I say people need to see that shit. Because people are, and I'm not here, I'm not trying to blame video games or anything, but what I'm saying is video games, stuff like that, violent movies, people, when that's people's only reference point, there is a certain thing in their brain that shuts off and it's not real. And people, it's just like shooting someone in real life is no different. The response in these people's brains is no different than it is when they do it on a video game, because the video games for years now make it look realistic. You do headshots and, you know, people's heads come apart and, you know, pieces of skulls fly everywhere. I mean, I'm just completely in total disagreement with the idea that we need to keep people from seeing these horrific things when these shootings and stuff happen. No, I feel like people need to see it. Everybody needs to see it. Everybody needs to take a fucking good look at that stuff and go, look at that. Look at that. You see what that is? That's what this stuff gets. That's the reality of people need to see that stuff. Just like they need to see the reality of war. I think people need to be seeing American soldiers and enemies getting blown to pieces on the nightly news. I think all that stuff needs to happen. And you can call me insensitive. You can call me whatever name you want to call me. I don't care. All that stuff is just a way for them to be able to continue. So they're trying to shield people from this stuff under the guise of, oh, respect for the victims, respect for no, bullshit. Again, bullshit. Have these people respected humankind on anything else? And all of a sudden when these things happen, they want to start hollering respect for the dead. Fuck you. People need to see this shit. That's what continues this stuff to happen. That's why people continue to tolerate wars. It's why they continue to tolerate violence and all this shit, because they are being shielded from the reality of it. And until the day comes when we can decide to say, because again, to me, that's one of the biggest problems of all this stuff that nobody's addressing. Nobody's addressing. They want to talk about, oh, we need to take guns away and have more gun control. And, oh, we need to have more tracking and tracing and more cameras and all this stuff. And all that shit is just a fucking guise to bring in more tyrannical control. That's what all of it is. They don't give a shit about respect or give a shit about people's feelings of being traumatized. No, that's the thing. People need to be traumatized by this shit. If people were allowed to see the carnage that happens every day all around the world, and instead of getting bullshit entertainment news and hearing about Kardashians and hearing about, the fucking royals and Meghan Markle and all this horse shit, if every fucking night when people turned on the news and they got hit with, well, here's what happened here's the travesty that happened today. 40 people got fucking chopped to pieces in fucking Myanmar, wherever. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass. And they show that shit. 40 American servicemen got blown to bits by an IED in Afghanistan. They show that shit. 20 people died in a mass shooting. They show that shit. Not allowing people to see the end result of war and death and destruction and evil is what is keeping and enabling this evil and this carnage and destruction to continue. And if you disagree with me and you don't like the fact that I'm saying that, well, I'm sorry. But it's the truth. I shoot it to you straight. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And that's the reality of it. Because I watch this shit. I don't do it because I'm fucking, I do it because it disgusts me. And it reinforces the idea of how fucked things are to me when I see it. And makes me want to fight it even more. Now, I've watched the videos. I watched those fucking beheading videos. I watched a video a couple years ago where they said it was ice or something, but who knows? A lot of those videos are fake. This one was not fake. I don't know if you can find this one anymore. It was the most disturbing video I've ever seen in my life. In my life, they lined up, I guess they I don't know what religion they were, whatever ISIS is against. It was like 10 like 10 men, probably in their mid-20s to early 30s. And they lined them all up. They knelt them on the ground, and they got little kids. They gave guns to little kids, too. And they just lined them up, and they had like 2 or 3 cameras. They just blew them away and let the kids shoot them. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen, the heads coming apart and the brains skittling across the fucking cement and the eyeballs. It was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. And I thought then when I was watching it, this is what people need to see. Because if people saw this, they wouldn't be sitting around on their hands, sitting around on their ass, playing party politics, playing left and right, blue team versus red team. Bullshit. Because people have been led politically into a mindset that is no different than what they engage in with professional sports. And that's sickening. And people take the same mindset now. Have you noticed that when people argue like football teams, I live in Dallas, so let's just use the Cowboys for an example. Somebody's favorite team is the Cowboys. Other person's favorite team is the Eagles, let's just say. And, there's a big rivalry, fuck you, and your team sucks. Oh, your team sucks. And then you hear these people talk about politics, and one's a Trumpy and one's a Democrat, and then but the argument is virtually the same. You just swap out some politician's name for the team name. Do you think that happened by accident? That didn't happen by accident. It's happened by design. Because that's how they want us to stay. If we stay in these factions, divided, bickering amongst ourselves and fighting amongst ourselves, we can never unite together to go after them, those motherfuckers. That's what it needs to go on here. That's why I'm sick of this shit. I'm sick of the left-right shit. I'm sick of the fucking my team's better than your team horse shit. And meanwhile, the one team, the main team, the only team that matters, the people running shit, are just fucking laughing at us, calling us slaves. Look at these fucking slaves that think they're walking around thinking they're fucking free, thinking they know something about anything. And little do they know, we control it all. We're the house. We're the fucking casino owners. We own it all. House wins every time. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. Doesn't matter what your pet team does on Sunday. Doesn't matter what your pet political side, left or right, does on election day. Doesn't matter. We control it all. We run it all. Doesn't matter. The house wins every time. And until people start realizing that and coming together and understanding these political divisions and these teams, just like every other illusion of choice that we're given in life. You go to McDonald's or you go to whatever restaurant. They give you your choices of what you can have. What you can have is on that list. Well, I don't want that. I want this. Well, too fucking bad. You get to choose from this, bitch, or you don't get shit. But still, people, it's still, well, you get to choose something, right? Nobody's telling you what to eat, so that's freedom. That's not freedom. That's not freedom. It's the illusion of freedom, and that's what all of this is. And I just think that the longer that people are shielded from the real truth and the real reality, the longer this is going to go on. I don't know what else to say. Sorry, I just came out the fucking gates of the rant tonight. I do well with it most days, but it's just frustrating. I'm sick of all sides. All this crap. It's bull, and it's about to get worse. We're heading back into the election cycle time again. What else do I want to rant about? We'll get into some news and some other topics and whatnot. I got a lot of stuff for you here tonight. What else do I want to rant about? I'm in a fucking rant mood right now, so let's do it. Let's fucking do this. I'm going to get on my rant box here for a minute. Fuck a soapbox. I fucking took that soapbox out back and threw fucking kerosene, gasoline on it. Some bitch lit it up. Fuck a soapbox. I'm on a rant box, motherfucker. You ready? So let me preface this. If I'm saying what I'm saying during this rant and I'm talking to, and I'm addressing somebody's particular question or something, please understand I'm just on a fucking rant box right now. Don't take it personally. Don't have your feelings hurt. It's not anything towards you. I'm just where I'm at right now. All right. So somebody left a comment last night and on my YouTube video, and where did it go? Oh, here it is. I don't even know. Some of the stuff this person's saying, it just doesn't even make sense. But it just got me. I feel like something I need to address. I've had to address this before in the past. This person says, thanks for talking about something other than designed opposition topics, i.e. politics, shooting, etc. Well, yeah, you might be right on some level that some of those are, but, you know, I'm still going to listen before I even go any farther, because this is my whole point of what I want to say with this. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. He says, ancient origins have always been your strong point. You should get into ley lines between modern and ancient structures. Boring. Listen, I talk about what I want to talk about when I want to talk about it. And not only that, but I talk about a wide variety of subjects. I cannot get on one topic and stay on that and just focus on that and talking about nothing but that forever. So, you know, if you're wanting me to do nothing but talk about like stuff I talked about, Lost Secrets of Ancient America, hey man, where were you? I'm sorry that you weren't running around when I was talking about that stuff, but I talked about that kind of stuff for 4 or 5 years straight. And I moved on back to other shit, just like I do with CMP stuff. I talked to the CMP stuff for like 5 or 6 years straight. I moved on to other stuff. I got into the spellcaster stuff. I'm moving out of the phase of that, and then I won't be talking about that stuff anymore. Then I'm moving on to the next thing. And if you don't want to come along with that, then that's on you, not me, because I'm never going to just stay on one topic. And listen, I mean, that's if you want to say to me now, had you said to me, have you worded this in a different way and said that, hey, thanks for talking about the, you know, like the ancient civilization stuff. That's my favorite particular topic. So thank you for talking about it. I would have taken this a different way, but, this whole thing, I can't be concerned with what one person thinks anymore. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It probably doesn't, because you've never been in my position doing a show like this and doing it for as long as I have, been on the air for 12 years. And doing it every month and every month being in the same situation again, wondering if I'm even going to be able to be here the next week, which is the situation we're again in now. It's our fundraising week, and we got to have people coming in and pulling together, and we got to have people contributing. We're getting down to the wire here. I've been delivering fucking shows all week. I've been working my ass off. You know, I've said this before, and it's one of if I don't mind working hard. I don't mind it at all. I don't mind spending 17, 18 hours a day doing something. But when you've got everybody out there who's just taking your work and not putting anything back into it, I mean, it becomes not worth it anymore, you know? But I'm not going to quit. And I'm not going to give up just because whatever people's personal hangups are. It doesn't have anything to do with me. Listen, but listen what else this guy says. Some of this shit he says here doesn't make any sense. Here's a Kabbalistic tidbit. Jerusalem was sacked in 70 AD. Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel 70 years later. It's riveting. Coincidence? I don't think so. Predictive planning from the book of Revelation? What? What the fuck are you smoking, motherfucker? Just send me a pound of it. Jerusalem was sacked in 70 AD and Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel 70 years at what? I don't even know how the fuck to respond to that. How do you respond to something like that? And then when I do respond to something like that, then I become the asshole. It's like you're fucked if you do, you're fucked if you don't. Sometimes with these people. What? I don't even. That thing blew my fucking head off. I don't even know how to respond. Jerusalem was sacked in 70 A.D. and then 70 years later, after 70 A.D., Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. I don't know, man. Maybe it's me, but I think your math is a little fucked up there, bud. I think your math is a little off. I don't even know how to respond to that. That you guys see what I'm up against here? That's just one comment. And again, I'm sorry, man. I'm not going hard in the paint on you personally. It's just, listen, if you like one particular topic, I talk about more than the other. That's fine. That's not a problem. That's your prerogative. That's great. But you can't expect me, because you're one single person who has that feeling. And I'm sure there are other people out there besides you have a feeling, but I'm just talking about in terms of this one comment. Because you're one single person that feels that way, you cannot expect me to change what I do based on what one single person on the internet thinks. And people will do that. And people will try to, pander to their audiences and stuff. I don't pander to my audiences. I get up here and talk about what I want to talk about. And I make films about what I want to make films about. And that's it. But, I'm sorry, man. You kind of fucking completely... that whole comment... What? If you're fucking around and that's a joke, okay, what? But Jerusalem was sacked in 70 A.D. and then 70 years later, Trump declared Jerusalem the capital of Israel. Let me ask you a question. What year do you think this is right now, bud? I don't even know what to say. You see what I'm saying here, folks? So anyway, I'm on the fucking, fuck that soapbox. I blew that bitch up. I'm on fucking the rant box tonight. By the way, if you haven't seen my special Halloween video I made for all of you, go check it out. It's on my YouTube channel right now. It's also up on our social media pages at Facebook, at the Global Reality Radio Network Facebook page, and the Josh Reeves Filmmaker Talks and Host Explorer page as well. Interesting little video that I made, just a quick little info video I made for Halloween when, sometimes I have little things like that, I have little tidbits, I have little things that I find or come across. And sometimes I save them for films, and then, it takes so long to make films. So sometimes you don't have places for them. I think once I get Spellcasters 2 and 3 out, there probably will be a few videos like that with some of that information in it, little things that maybe didn't have a place in the overall structure of the film, but are interesting. People sometimes ask me, well, how, they'll watch a film. Well, you didn't talk about this. Well, you can't put every single little piece. Believe me, I fucking tried. And I'm not speaking from non-experience here. I'm speaking from absolute experience. Believe me, I've tried. That's what this film process for Spellcaster 2 and 3 has been all about. Trying to get every fucking piece of information shoehorned in there, and then not being able to do it, and then becoming frustrated and having to do a million rewrites and go back and change shit. New stuff comes in. I'm really actually, in a way, glad that it's taken this long for me to get this done, because if I had rushed this out a long time ago, I probably would have pulled whatever film I'd put out and probably deleted it from the internet, because there's a bunch of stuff that I had written originally in these films that I found now is disinfo. Shit changes, man. Normally it doesn't, but there's a bunch of stuff I've had to go back and change and add new stuff. I've had to change this film 5, 6, 7 different times. And so in a way that's good, because I like I said, even though I've resigned myself to understanding that it's never going to be perfect, it's never going to come out exactly the way I have it envisioned in my brain, but at least I'm going to be confident in knowing that the information is more solid than it would have been had I rushed this movie out a year ago. So, and on top of that, all the hell shit, all the bullshit I've had to deal with here this year with the studio and continued problems of getting funding. Again, I'm tired of it. I got too much work to do, and I don't have time for idiots and assholes and haters and people who aren't on board. Get on board or get the fuck off the train. You know what I'm saying? So to those of you who are with me and who have made it clear you're with me, I love you. Thank you. Let's fucking do this. Fuck these other people. Fuck these other idiots. I'm only worried about those of you who I know for a fact, and there's many of you out there that are standing with me and are riding with me, and I'm ready to do this. And I've got so much coming down the pike, but I can't do it without funding, man. And we're just in a situation right now where we've got to have 100% of our operating cost goal in at latest in the next 48 hours. So it's time for everybody to step up. Again, we're doing questions. You want to get a question in? I'll be doing shows throughout the weekend. So you want to get a question in for the broadcast, contribute $100 or more, and you'll get a question in. I'll do my best to answer it for you. A while back when we did this, one of our listeners had sent in a question. And as I said before, you know, I'll do my best to get into everybody's questions. Sometimes I get some certain questions about things, especially ones that don't really have anything to do with info at all, which I don't mind. I'll answer a question about anything. But sometimes I get these very, relative questions. You know what I mean? Like somebody has look, I'll just use an example because this is one that I got. Let's say somebody has a favorite band. And that particular favorite band of somebody is a band I've never heard of or I'm not into. They contribute, let's say they contribute $100. They want to ask me a question about this particular band. And then I'm looking at this, I'm going, well, I've never even heard of these guys. And then I go and listen to their music and go, I don't even like this. This is crap to me. This is not something, I can't relate to this. This is not something I would ever listen to in a million years. It's not my thing. And it's not like these guys are somebody setting the world on fire, have set the world on fire. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not singling out this one person. I've gotten a lot of these like this, to be honest with you. But what am I supposed to do there? You know what I mean? What am I supposed to do in that situation? Because either way, you're putting me in a situation where I'm going to come out looking like a fucking dick. But that's not my fault. You chose a question, chose me to answer, and then when I give you my 100, this happened last time we had questions. That's why I've almost stopped doing this. Because people contribute, I give you my 100% unfiltered answer, and then people get butthurt, and they feel like they get their feelings hurt. They say I'm being an asshole because I give you a 100%, listen, a 100% honest answer. 98% of people in the world are never going to give you a 100% honest answer about it. They're only going to give you everything they think is going to placate you and not hurt your feelings. And I don't do that. I shoot you straight, man, even if it means you're going to get your feelings hurt. And even if it means I might lose a listener and supporter in the process, because I can't bullshit you, man. I can't do it. It's not within my physical being to do it. And yes, I'll admit that's a detriment. Yes, I'll admit that's a character flaw, but I'd rather have that character flaw than a million others. I don't think being 100% honest, yes, you can, I can't do it. So one of our listeners a few months ago, he asked this question. I didn't address this question on air. He asked another one. And I said, well, how about you donate $100 and then I'll answer your next question. He said, well, you didn't answer my last one. All right, fair game. But I didn't answer the last one because I was trying to be nice. And I already made one person butthurt last time, a listener and supporter, which I didn't mean to do. He asked me a question. I gave my 100% unfiltered, honest answer. And he got his feelings hurt about it. And I felt bad. But, man, that's what you get from me. Maybe I wasn't clear about that. I'm not doing it out of hate or spite or to be mean. I just can't give you anything but an unfiltered answer. So I'll address this one. A few months ago, he asked me, have I ever heard of the band Thought Industry? I had never even heard of this band. I looked them up. I checked into them. I listened to their music. Not my thing at all. I don't have anything else to say. The only things additionally I could say about it would be negative. And what good is that to you? Because it's just like some of these other questions people have gotten. They want me to reinforce how they already feel about something. And when I don't do that, they get hurt. It hurts their feelings. And and then they hold that against me. But so, I mean, I need to have the disclaimer with these questions. If you ask me a question, you contribute, and you want me to answer a question, you need to be prepared for the fact that I may give an answer that not only you're not going to like, but an answer that could possibly hurt your feelings. And, this thought industry thing, I looked at it. Listen, man, I have nothing positive to say about them. I listened to their music. It didn't do anything for me. It didn't make me go, oh, man, I want to check this. I don't get these guys. It didn't do anything for me. It sounded like a million bands I heard in a million different clubs when I was playing gigs and going to gigs back in the 90s. That's what they sounded like to me. Didn't sound like anything special. Didn't sound like anything that was groundbreaking or new to me. And that's honestly why I didn't answer your question last time, because I'd already had somebody get mad at me. And then he asked the second question he asked this time. What do you think about the new Tool record? The new Tool record came out. It literally came out the day after I had to evacuate my place for like a month. So to be honest with you, well, number one, for whatever reason, they didn't come out with the record on vinyl when the record came out. And they said it's going to come out later at a later date. Who knows when that'll be? So that's why you hadn't heard me talk about it on the show. I've been kind of reserving my opinion about it until I listen to it. I'm kind of a snob. If I want to I like to be able to listen to music that I'm into or potentially would be into from bands that I like. I like to listen to it with the full experience. And that for me means, through my stereo, on vinyl, with a diamond needle, through a tube preamp, into actual speakers, and not on some streaming service on a fucking iPhone with little 1-inch speakers or half-inch speakers, whatever. So maybe my opinion will change. Maybe when they finally come out with it on vinyl, I'll get it on vinyl and I'll listen to it on vinyl. And if my opinion changes, then I'll get up here and say, hey, my opinion changed. Wow, I like the album now. I like the songs there. But to give you my 100% honest opinion, I heard the record once, and I heard it when it came out, and on MP3 or whatever. And the most positive thing I can say about it is it sounds like Tool. Sounds like Tool. I mean, that was my first. I mean, they weren't, and maybe I don't know, maybe that's what they want to do as a band, and maybe that's what they believe most of their fans want as a band, probably is. And that's fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But considering it took 13 years for them to make a new record, I think people maybe anticipated more. Just to me, it just sounded like another Tool record to me. Didn't sound not bad, not any worse or any better than anything they've ever done. It just to me just sounded like Tool, And hey, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know what I mean? Because oftentimes people get used to a sound, and they get used to how a band sounds, and then a band says, well, we're getting tired of sounding like that. Well, it's changing. We want to change it and mix it up. We don't want to stay one thing. And they go in, they change it up, and they mix it up, and for them, it's refreshing. For them, it's like, oh, God, this is so great. It feels new again. And then the audience is like, I'm not digging it, man. This is, I ordered scrambled eggs, and you brought me chili. This is not what I ordered. This is not the same thing. And so the flip side of that is just continuing to do what you've always done and the way you've always done it, and not change the formula at all. And I think that's what Tool's done. And I think there's things to be said positively and negatively for that. I think you have the potential to split your audience 50-50 down the middle with something like that. Because you're going to have, I'm sure there's an extremely large proportion of Tool's fans that's exactly what they want. Maybe that's why it took them this long to come out with a record, because they couldn't decide whether they wanted to keep doing the same thing and doing the same sound they've always done, or try something different. But I just think when you come out, when it just, to me, doesn't sound like it should have taken 13 years for them to come out with that record. It sounds like he could have come out with that record 2 years after they put out the last one. You understand what I mean? That's my whole thing with it. It just sounds like they picked right up where they left off, and again, that could be, from depending on what your perspective is, that could be a positive thing. So a lot of people, man, believe it or not, that's what they want. I personally, I like bands that progress while being able to keep the core thing that made you like them in the first place. And what I just said is pretty much the most impossible thing. That's almost the most impossible thing you can do as an artist or a band, is to keep the core of what, because you're gonna progress. You should always progress. You should always change. If for instance, I was in a band, last band I was in, and oh God, I don't even want to say this. I'm afraid somebody will hear this and get butthurt. I won't use names. We had two people in the band. So you had two singers and two songwriters, and we had one particular songwriter who, from the very beginning of the band, almost immediately within the first 4 or 5 months, because both of these people were individual songwriters on their own, and mostly being solo acts, and then we put together this band. And one of the people in the band, their songwriting started to adapt to the format of writing. When you're writing songs on your own, you write songs in a different way than you do in the format of a band. Your songwriting changes in the format of a band because you're not just writing it just on your own anymore. You're writing it with accompaniment and other instruments and everything else. So one of the songwriters in the band's music or in songs began to evolve to that format and the style of writing within the context of a band almost immediately after the band started. And then the other one didn't at all. Their songwriting didn't progress throughout the entirety of the band, 2 years or whatever, however long we were together. And they didn't change their style or try to adapt their style to the band format anymore. It would just still write their songs like they would on their own with a drum machine and bring them into the band and expect us to shoehorn music into that format. And I don't care who you are, that's a hard thing to do. But when you're in a band, you can write your own songs on your own and have your own, thing all day long. But when you're writing songs in the context of a band, then it's important to start to get into that mindset, and some people, they just, doesn't matter how long they're doing a particular thing, they just never progress or go any farther with it. And sometimes, and again, I'm not knocking or saying that's always particularly negative. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes you're like, oh, dude, you're awesome. Don't ever fucking change. Don't change a thing about what you're doing, ever. That's fucking rad. You got it figured out. Stick with that. Do that forever, and you're going to be fucking successful. But then you got other people who never evolve and never change at all, and they're stuck. And again, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It's very subjective, man. You know what I mean? There's no right or wrong to it. There really isn't. And the same thing comes with, listen, if you love Thought Industry and they're the fucking greatest band that you've ever heard, and you love them and you love all their records and you celebrate their entire catalog, man, don't let me fucking tell you otherwise. Go get it. Listen to it. Same thing with the new Tool record. If you're into it, fucking awesome. Rock on. Rage to that shit. Drop some fucking acid. Drop some DMT and put that shit on, dog. Do it. But again, the biggest thing is when people ask me questions and I give them a 100% honest answer, and then they hold that against me. You know what I mean? But again, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, again, the new Tool record, maybe once I hear it on vinyl and they come out on vinyl, maybe my thought will change. But my first initial reaction from the first and one and only listen to it was, it didn't knock my hair back. It didn't make me go, oh my God, this is amazing. It didn't floor me. I already know Danny Carey's one of the greatest drummers on earth. I've known that for many years. I knew nothing on that new Tool record did anything to sway me one way or the other in that opinion. but it just didn't sound like there was any particular kind of growth there. And again, maybe that's what they want. Maybe that was their goal. I don't know. I just think when it takes you 13 years to come out with a new record, and the shit sounds just like it would have sounded if you came out with it a year after you came out with the last record. I don't know. It's hard for me. To me, I'm not into that. To me, I would have liked to have heard some growth. Or at least heard some like interesting production or something. I don't know, man. Again, it's not bad. It fits in. I think it fits in perfectly with the rest of their material that they've done up to this point. But am I gonna when the year is up here, not too long from now, and I put together my list of the best albums of 2019 that I heard? Is the new Tool record going to be on that list? I don't know. As of right now, I would say probably not. Because it just doesn't sound... I don't know, it doesn't have a new sound to it. Listen, I like all different types of music. I don't just like heavy stuff. I like indie rock and indie pop and stuff. I have for many years. I came from that. I like all different types of music. I like hip hop. I like everything. And in fact, if you wanted me to give you probably the best record I've heard this year, you want to know, honest to God, what the best record I've probably heard all year is? And probably most of you out there, if you heard this record, you'd be like, I don't like this. This is crap. The best record I heard all year, probably my pick for album of the year, Jenny Lewis, On the Line. Probably the record I've listened to more and gone back and listened to again and again. Phenomenal record, phenomenal production. The band that she put together, the studio band that she put together for this, she's got the two drummers, the double drums, things like they used to do in the 70s. She got the two drummers that played on All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, Ringo Starr and Jim Keltner. Jesus fucking Christ. Who'd you bring in on bass? Don Was, the famous producer. Who she got on keyboards? Oh, a little guy named Benmont Tench from the fucking Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Beck is on that record. Fucking, who else? Phenomenal record, though. Liam Gallagher's new solo album, Why Me, Why Not? Phenomenal record. Best music Liam's done since the heydays of Oasis. And I don't know if I don't know, you guys hear he got diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease? He may not be, and he's going to eventually, his voice is going to be completely gone. He's not going to be able to sing again. Well, he put out that new record, and within a week of that record being in the stores, that motherfucker went back to the studio and started recording the next one. Because I think he thinks he doesn't have much time. He's making haste while the sun's shining. Phenomenal. His voice sounds amazing now. Better than it sounded maybe ever. Because he's taking care of it. I like the Raconteurs Help a Stranger album that came up. Thought that was a fucking great record. Great production on that. Raconteurs have always been my my favorite non-White Stripes, Jack White project these days, and a bunch of different projects. I never really get into the Dead Weather. I like his solo stuff all right, but the Raconteurs, just because that's a band, it's not just him. It's not just the Jack White show. And I was into all the other the guys that are in that band, the Raconteurs. I was into all their individual bands and projects before they ever even formed that. So that's why they hold a special place to me. Dean Fertitta on keyboards. He plays with Queens of the Stone Age now. I was into his band in the early 2000s called the Wax Wings. Their first album, Low to the Ground, masterpiece. Masterpiece. Still one of my favorite records ever made. The bass player and the drummer came from a band called the Greenhorns, another Detroit band, one of my favorite bands. I actually saw them open for the White Stripes at Trees, a club here in Dallas, 2 days after 9/11, September 13th, 2011. And they, to me, blew the White Stripes off the stage, even though the White Stripes are great. But and then Brendan Benson, who I saw about a year after that. They're kind of like a supergroup. They're phenomenal. If you like just, old school straight ahead rock and roll, they're it. Past that, I'm trying to think of any other records I heard this year that that I really dug and got into. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I like a wide variety of stuff. A few years ago, I'm also a Megadeth fan. A few years ago, Megadeth came out with that album, Dystopia. The record they had put out before that, I think, was called Super Collider. And God, it was such garbage. Oh, it was hot garbage. It was terrible. And so when they got ready when the next record came out, Dystopia, I was like, let's see what kind of hot garbage this is. I was ready to hear it, to listen to it, to hear how bad it was, because I was like, man, that last record was so terrible. This has got to be they're probably going to follow suit with this one. So I was like, let me put this shit on and see how bad it is. And then I put it on, and it was fucking amazing. It was like one of the best records they've done since the 80s. Phenomenal songs. And they ended up winning a Grammy for it. Never won a Grammy in their career before that. It was phenomenal. But it was phenomenal, and it was great because it didn't sound like any of their other records. The production didn't sound like any other records. They had Chris Adler formerly of Lamb of God playing on that record. He's a phenomenal drummer. And the thing I liked about that record is it still had the same kind of things that you've come to expect from Megadeth. But unlike Tool, it was a different place. It was a different sound. You're like, wow, this doesn't sound like any of their other records. Yes, there are things where you can say, okay, that sounds like something they would have done on, Peace Cells or something. But, there's a progression in the songwriting. There's an evolution in the songwriting. And that's just not anything I hear with Tool. But again, it's a subjective thing. And I'm sure that probably the majority, I could be wrong, but I would say probably the majority of Tool fans, that's exactly what they probably one of the reasons why it took them that long to come up with a new record. Because there was probably that internal thing even within the band where I'm sure there were probably some people within the band that wanted to go to a new place or try some different things. And then the old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it argument comes in, Because, again, as much as you want to do some different stuff sometimes, when you realize that the majority because even though they didn't put out a new record for 13 years, Tool was still touring and doing shows and doing concerts, And even though people were just paying to go hear them do all the stuff they ever heard. Which is probably why there was no progression. Because they spent the last 13 years touring, doing shows, but not putting out new music. And during that time, they're just getting up there and playing their old stuff the same way they've always played it. But again, that's a subjective thing. To me, I want to hear some progression. Probably to a big majority of Tool fans, they don't want to hear any progression. It's like, I ordered my meal this way last time. I want it made the exact same way this time and every time afterwards, and I'm fine with that, and that's good for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what you want. But you can't expect everybody to get on board with it. Not that you're going to lose some people. And that happens. I get frustrated with and I've seen this happen across multiple decades. I get frustrated with bands who, right when they're around for a long time, on the come up, and then they finally hit big and get some success and break through maybe in the mainstream. And then the next record later, here's this great rock band, and then the next, they've hit their peak and they're reaching maximum people, and the next record they come out with is a dance record. I've seen it happen across decades. There's nothing more frustrating, and this is absolutely because record labels, when you start to get that kind of success, you go from a band that probably wasn't making them a lot of money to making them a lot of money. They want to that to continue. So for them, their idea is to try to shoehorn you into whatever the current musical things are. And they did that to Kiss, remember? I like the Dynasty record. I'll be honest with you. I like the Dynasty record. The whole people who say that Dynasty was a disco record, it's not a disco record. There are a couple of songs in the dance vein on that, particularly the most well-known song, I Was Made for Loving You. But that was because the label they were on at the time, Casablanca Records, every other band except Kiss on that label was a disco. They had Donna Summer, and they were a disco label, essentially. And that started a decline for them that didn't wane until they, they made an attempt to come back with Creatures of the Night with some heavier stuff. But that was what caused it. Queen, same thing. And that's the thing about Queen's record Queen's records is that good or bad, whether you like it or not, every single record they did sounded different. From the first record all the way to the end. And did the music get necessarily better as they went along? No, it didn't. Still great. I happen to like all of Queen's records. Are there ones I like more than others? Absolutely. But I happen to like all of their records because when you listen to them, if you start from the beginning, from Queen 1 and go all the way through, it's amazing especially when you think about how quickly bands were turning over new records back then. You think a band could have got away with taking 13 years to make a new record back in those days? Absolutely fucking not. Bands were knocking out records every 6 months back then. Go look at the first 3 Kiss records. The first 3 Kiss records came out within 6 months apart of each other. It was 6 months album tour every 6 months. And it's amazing when you go back and you look at some of these records and like the first however many 4 or 5 Black Sabbath albums, the first 4 or 5 Queen albums, the first 4 or 5 Rush albums. And you see, when you think about in terms of 4 or 5 albums with most bands, you're probably thinking 4 or 5 records. These days, do bands and artists even put out 4 or 5 records? That's probably the amount they put out maybe in a decade. Bands might put out 5 records a decade now. Maybe not even that. Maybe 2 or 3. But when you look at how quickly and how fast these artists and these bands were progressing back in the day from record to record, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. And I love bands like that. I love bands where Rush was the same way. Rush never had, they had some albums that sounded similar, but they progressed and had different sounds and different, whether you liked it or not. And I feel the same way about the Rush catalog, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 records, and not the records you're thinking of either. Caress of Steel. I don't own a copy of Caress of Steel. I've listened. You know how many times I've listened to Caress of Steel in my life? Maybe 3 times. As opposed to I've probably listened to every other Rush record, 500 times. I like all the 70s stuff. I actually, believe it or not, I like all the 80s stuff too. I didn't when I was a young Rush fan. I'll admit that. When I was a Rush fan coming up when I was 15, 16, I didn't like the 80s stuff. Because I thought it was too political. Isn't that hilarious? That's hilarious. It's not even political at all. I mean, there's some stuff. I like the majority of their 90s stuff. I like even the late 80s stuff. I like Hold Your Fire. I love that record. Have it on vinyl. I like Presto. I like Roll the Bones. I love Counterparts. I saw all those tours. Test Reco was one of the best tours I ever saw. Not a huge fan of the Test Reco album as a whole. I just don't like the recording of it. It's when that's when digital recording started to kind of become the thing. But I still like some of the songs on Test Reco, and they were really good live. Then they had the hiatus because they had all the stuff happen with Neil's family. His wife and daughter died within a year of each other. Then they came back and they came out with that Vapor Trails album, which it was horrible. Sounded horrible. The production was terrible. It made you think, God, did these guys, is it a good thing these guys came back? Because this record it was terrible. It sounded like worse than like demos sound. And then a few years ago, they corrected and they came out with a Vapor Trails Revisited or something, I think is what it was called, where they actually properly remixed it, changed the whole sound of the record, and it improved it. I'm still not a huge fan of that record. But they definitely improved it and made it at least somewhat listenable now with the later version they came out with it. what else? What was the next record? I guess Snakes and Arrows would have been the one after that. Like Snakes and Arrows a lot. And I guess when they had the last one before they broke up, Clockwork Angels. I like Clockwork Angels too, but the production on that is similar to the production on what Metallica record was it? Hardwired. I can't remember. One of the Metallica records, Death Magnetic, I think was the one. Yeah. Yeah. Rush's Clockwork Angels and Death Magnetic by Metallica both to me suffer from the same issues, which is they're mixed way too hot for digital format. There's so much distortion in the listening. Because it's become the thing where, you know, they want everything. Basically, they call it brick wall mastering. It's a technique they use. You run everything, the final mix, through a limiter, and you run everything right up to the red line on the meters, where everything's just right at the red line without clipping. And what that does causes fatigue in listening. If you listen about 15 or 20 minutes of music that's mixed like that, you're like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And you stop and you put on something else. And you don't even know the reason why you're feeling that. Well, you think it's just something to do with your mood. Oh, I'm not in the mood for this right now. It's not anything about your mood. It's because the brick wall mastering in some cases is done to the point to where it can be done right. It can be done right and it sounds great. But this caused this thing they called the volume wars. You know what record it all started with? It all started with Oasis's first record, Definitely Maybe. Because that was the first record that employed what they call brick wall mastering, where everything is right on the red line. But you know what? They came out with a reissue, because they never came out with that on vinyl initially. And a few years ago, they came out with, they re-released all the original Oasis records on vinyl. And I have some of them, and they're really good reissues, because instead of trying to cram everything on one record, in order for you to be able to listen to it in much higher quality, they expand them out to double records, even though they're only single records. They end up putting them on double vinyl. And so when I got Definitely Maybe on vinyl, I was excited. You know, I was like, man, it's one of my favorite records ever. Can't wait to hear it on vinyl. And I listened to it the other day just to see if my thoughts had changed on it. It doesn't make any sense. Because, see, in the analog form, when you mix music, you mix music completely different ways depending upon the medium. Like when you're mixing and mastering music to digital, you have to pull everything back off the red line so you can have dynamics, because if you start pushing anything up on the red line in digital, then you just get distortion. Whereas with analog, you can push everything up to the red line and beyond, and instead of getting distortion, you get a creamy analog overdrive with the saturation of the tape, of the analog tape that you're using. So that's the sound that you hear when you put on like the CD version of Definitely Maybe. It's just, it's loud. It's fucking cranked. Everything's right on the red line. Which, again, if you're listening to stuff or mixing stuff within the analog format to vinyl, then that's a perfect way to mix it. You can brick wall all day because you can push stuff into the red line and you won't get that digital distortion. It just turns into a smooth, crisp kind of sound. I don't know what they were thinking, but when they made the vinyl of Definitely Maybe, they took all the brick walling away. And they mixed it to where it actually has dynamics and stuff now. Everything isn't on the red line. Which would be great if they did that in a digital format. They did it in an analog format, and it just doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound right. I kept cranking it up and trying to get the record to sound how I'm used to hearing it sound, and it's too clean. Because they gave everything dynamics, they brought everything down off the red line, which they shouldn't have done for vinyl. It didn't make any sense to me. it just seemed like that, just a bonehead Gallagher Brothers thing, that somebody made the decision to do that. Like they convinced themselves that that was a thing that sounds good or whatever. And it just doesn't sound as good. It doesn't. And that's, people always ask me, what sounds better, digital or analog? Well, to be honest with you, there's a lot of factors that weigh into that answer. Because I can tell you this, in some cases, digital does sound better than analog. In some cases it does. But it depends on what medium it is, what format it is, what the sampling rate it was mastered into. For instance, it's probably like 7 or 8 months ago. After realizing I had all of these different versions of Queens of Night at the Opera, I have like all these different versions. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do the fucking Pepsi challenge with this shit. I'm going to do the fucking Pepsi challenge with this shit. I'm going to once and for all, since I've got all these different formats and different ways to listen to it, I'm going to listen to this and see which one I think sounds better. So I've got it on vinyl. I've got the original vinyl, 1975 original pressing. I've got the original CD. I've got a remastered CD. I've got the DVD audio version. I've got the Blu-ray audio version. I've got the MP3 download. I've got the high fidelity version. Anyway, so going in, I had my ideas of which one was going to sound better than all of them. And I figured it was going to be, to be honest with you, I figured it was going to be the vinyl version, the original vinyl. Most of the time, the original, not repressing, the original vinyl versions of albums, 95% of the time, maybe even higher than that, but I'll just be conservative and say 95% of the time, those sound the best. Because a lot of these newer reissue records of older records, they're just fucking burning them or pressing them to vinyl right off of digital files. And when you listen back to it, that's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, you might be listening to it on a record, but it sounds no different than the digital version that you listen to. Whereas if you put on the original version, which is mastered from an analog tape that hasn't been sitting in a vault for 40 or 50 or however many years, right? So you're listening to a print that was made when that tape was fresh and new, when that album was recorded in 75 or whatever. So most of the time, that's going to sound the best. But I'll tell you what, it's interesting. And then I figured the Blu-ray audio would probably be, because it's Blu-ray you're talking about, but ended up being the DVD audio version. Ended up being the best sounding version. And the conclusion that I came to why that is because even with analog and even with vinyl, you've got a limited frequency spectrum, right? And when you talk about going to digital and CDs, that spectrum even goes down even farther. But listening to a vinyl record is the closest that you can get frequency spectrum wise, unless you have you're listening to a digital format that can play back in the highest quality sampling rate there is. For instance, when you listen to a regular CD, a CD is 16-bit audio at 44.1 thousand kilohertz. That is the standard. You can't go higher than that for a standard CD. Whereas if you go up to DVD and even Blu-ray, you can go from standard 16-bit CD to a 24-bit and 32-bit rate at, instead of 44.1 thousand kilohertz, you're talking about going up to 96,000 kilohertz and even as high as 192,000 kilohertz. Now, all those are frequency spectrum bands. So the higher frequency spectrum band that you can record in and then play back in and hear it back in, the better it's going to sound. So for whatever reason, the mix of A Night at the Opera on Blu-ray audio, even though it was much newer than the DVD audio version, the Blu-ray audio version didn't even come close to sounding as good because the sampling rates that they used on the DVD audio version were much higher. They were like the highest, like 192,000 kilohertz, 24 bits, straight off the original master tape, and it sounds phenomenal. And it's also mixed in DTS 5.1. So you can actually hear the instrumentation moving around the room. It's incredible. And that's, and sometimes I'll buy, you'll buy a reissue record. Sometimes the reissues sound better than the original. Sometimes they do. So there's really it really is, music is a very subjective thing. What might sound great to you might sound like ass to me, and what sounds like ass to me might sound great to you, and vice versa, and everything else, and all that's fine. But, that's why it's difficult for me to, when people ask my opinion about something, whether it be music or whether it be any of these topics, and then I give you my 100% unfiltered opinion, and then people get mad about it. It's just frustrating. Anyway, let's see what else we got. We have a question here from Tony. Tony says, "Hi, Josh. This might be a dumb question." Oh, no, Tony, there's no dumb questions, only dumb people. You know that. This might be a dumb question. I was taught that space is outside the Earth's atmosphere and outside the radiation barrier. It seems that nowadays people are considering space to be inside the radiation barrier. What is your definition of space? Okay, so you're talking about Van Allen radiation belts. What's my definition of space? Well, I don't think it's probably much different than yours or anybody else's. Here's how I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong. As I understand it, space is anything outside of the atmosphere. Anything outside of the atmospheric barrier of the Earth. When you go beyond the atmosphere, that's space. Now, the immediate area around the Earth where we put satellites and all that stuff, low Earth orbit or whatever, that's technically, technically that's space. The way I understand it is, though, it's not until anything beyond the Van Allen radiation belts is considered deep space, correct? That's the way I was taught. Anything beyond where you could orbit around Earth and whatnot, where we put space stations and the space shuttle and all that, anything beyond that is deep space. The space station is in low orbit around 250 miles up. The X-37B also stays in low Earth orbit. There is a bar in Tucson where Freemasons, Knights of Malta, and other connected people get together over drinks. Oh, well, that sounds like a fucking hoot and holler. I'm going to fucking come check that out. I'd probably get killed in a place like that. I met Gabby Gifford's husband, the astronaut there. Wow. That's the second one of our listeners. That's interesting. Makes me think them motherfuckers ain't doing nothing but drinking in bars. That's the second listener of ours that has come at me with a story about meeting Gabby Giffords and her husband in a bar. Huh. What are the odds? You know what I mean? That's weird. I met Gabby Gifford's husband, the astronaut there. I didn't even know her husband was an astronaut. Shows you what I know. I don't know everything, folks. He told me point blank that he has not been into the vacuum of space past the Van Allen radiation belts. Low Earth orbit is where everything stays. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, doesn't everybody know that? I'm kind of confused by your question here a little bit, Tony. I think you're just getting, sometimes people get bogged down in the terminology because the terminology is not always specific to what it is. People say, when people go up into the International Space Station, which again, as you said, that's in low Earth orbit, people are not going to say, yeah, I'm going to low Earth orbit. They're going to say I'm going to space, because technically anything outside of the atmosphere is space. I understand what you're saying, Tony, and you're right. But it's still space. But we've never got anything. There's no evidence we've ever went back and forth through there. No. With all space talk and news, I believe it is made to be confusing on purpose in order to keep people from understanding where space actually begins. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm confused. I see what you're saying, and you're right, but still, if you're outside the Earth's atmosphere, even if you're in low Earth orbit, you're still in space. You're not in deep space, you're in interstellar space, but you're still outside of the atmospheric bubble of the planet. So technically, yes, you are in space. Just not in deep space. But it's just a nomenclature you have to use that people can know what you're talking about. People don't say, we're going to launch a satellite into near space. We're going to send a rocket up to near space. No, we're sending a rocket up to space. Even though it's not deep space, it's still anything technically outside of our atmosphere is space. As a side note, I went and saw one of the Mars landers, the one that supposedly found water on Mars. It was made of polished aluminum, and we all know what happens to aluminum when you put it in a microwave. How is this shit crossing the radiation barrier multiple times? Well, Tony, you're confused, bud. You're confused. Whatever lander you were looking at, that was a model. The mate told you that was a real one. We've never sent any landers to Mars and brought them back. I think you're confused, bud. Any probes or anything like that we've ever sent to Mars are still there, have stayed there. We have never sent anything to Mars and then brought it back. So your whole premise there is off, bud. I'm sorry to have to tell you. They have those models that are exactly like the ones they sent. But if you were to make the argument, how could we get it through there in the first place and then get it to Mars? I'd agree with you there. I think all that shit's just as fake as anything else. And that stuff we've seen where they're supposedly they tint all the pictures that we see. They're all tinted red, and it's actually blue. There's actually blue sky on Mars, and I've been lied to about that. I believe that, but no. How is this shit crossing the radiation barrier multiple times? I don't believe anything or anyone has been able to get past the Van radiation belts. But because people talk like this happens all the time, because the word space is used so loosely. Yeah, I agree, Tony, but I think you're a little confused, man. I don't know what... You can go and look this up. They've never sent a lander to Mars and sent it back. That's never happened. We don't have those capabilities. All the rocks, all the Mars rocks that we have they were all found on Earth. Whenever catastrophic event they had on Mars many years ago, possibly that wiped out some people believe they wiped out civilization there. But yeah, a lot of the Mars rocks have been found. But no, they've never sent a rover. Sorry, you're confused. And if you're telling me you went to some museum and saw a rover and they told you that it went to Mars and came back, and that one you're sitting there looking at is the one that went to Mars and came back, they lied to you. Look it up. No, we have never sent anything to Mars and back. It's too far. But you're right. But I think you're kind of, I don't know. I get this kind of stuff all the time. I think people I know it's confusing, but technically you're not wrong, and technically you're not right either. Because again, anything outside of the atmospheric barrier of the Earth is space. Granted, you're right. It's not deep space, but it's still outside of Earth. And the same, whether you go past the radiation belts or not, as far as we know, it's still the same environment, it's still the vacuum of space, but then again, maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the atmosphere, maybe the conditions past the Van Allen radiation belts are, long before I even knew about the Van Allen radiation belts, or even before I even really knew what they were and all that stuff and was into the moon landing stuff, I remember hearing this stuff about John D. And reading the stuff about John D. channeling stuff and also even some of the Scientology stuff gets into that. With Xenu and the Thetans and all that gets into some of that. That's where they think all the, the souls, the Thetans that go into people and stuff. Xenu put this fucking energy barrier around the earth to trap the souls here. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that we have no technology to get anything through the Van Allen radiation belt and then back. Nothing at all. And that right there is the single reason why we didn't go to the moon. Period. End of story. All the other arguments can go out the window. Everything else to me is speculation. Fact of the matter is, you can't send something back. You definitely could not have sent Hasselblad cameras, analog cameras with film in them through the radiation belts. There would be nothing can come back. You couldn't send pictures back through if you're talking about them being on negatives, because the radiation would expose the negatives and you'd get no picture. Talked about that a million times. Yeah, man. No, good points though. But I'm kind of confused about why you brought up the Gabby Giffords husband thing though. A little confused on that. He said he's not been into the vacuum of space past the Van Allen radiation belt. So what you're saying is, you're saying that you believe and you think that he believes that low Earth orbit, this side of the Van Allen radiation belt, is actually not the vacuum of space. It's actually some kind of a different environment. Well, what do you suppose that different environment is? Water? Is that possible? The reason I say that is because I've seen some footage of things in that part, around the shot from the space station, stuff that looks like it's swimming by, like it's swimming through water. I've seen some of these spacewalk footage where you see bubbles coming up. Now, some people have said that's because that's fake and they shoot that in water. But from what I understand, when they shoot fake stuff, they do it in saline, in a giant saline tank, because in saline you don't get bubbles like that. I don't know. I mean, it's possible, man. It's possible. What I understand is that the vacuum of space is the same once you get out of the atmosphere as it is beyond the Van Allen radiation belts. That's, you're saying, I guess what you're saying is that it isn't the case. So what I'd like to know is, what is the theory on what, if outside the environment of the atmosphere of Earth isn't the same as the vacuum of space, then what is it exactly? I don't know. I don't know. Man. Yeah, I really didn't think all that would have tied up that much of the show tonight. I'm kind of glad we got into some different stuff tonight. I didn't really have an insane amount of news I wanted to get into tonight anyway, and not only that, it'll give me material for the show tomorrow. One thing I did want to bring up is, I thought it was interesting because I talked about the Luke Radowski pedophile Epstein Island thing this week. One interesting thing that I think has happened as a result of that is that, because it seemed like they kind of had been kind of quiet on the Epstein thing for a while since it happened, but people are still very much into it. And I think that from some of the certain things, because in that video, which of course went absolutely viral and made world news, Radowski and that other clown that's with him, are making references to him, not being dead or whatever. So I thought it was interesting within like a day or 2 days after that. And this, again, this is what makes me think this is all a part of of a psyop. And we're supposed to believe that somehow Radowski's not a part of it. The fuck? Sorry, guys. I just had some kind of weird fucking looking bug fly on my screen. Gross. The fuck was that? Weird looking beetle or something. I don't remember what I was saying now. Oh, the Epstein thing. Yeah. Well, now this week they've come out, just a couple of days after that Radowski video came out, now they come out with stuff saying, and I think they said this initially, and it seems like they're kind of recycling it now. But now, like 2 days after that Radowski video comes out, now they come out with this new. Now they're releasing the Epstein autopsy information and saying that his, it was more consistent with strangulation than with hanging. And so what's that done? Well, now it's got people thinking, now see how they're trying to create the counter conspiracy. They're trying to sell you on their counter conspiracy by saying, maybe, see, maybe he didn't kill himself. Maybe he was murdered, instead of the actual narrative of all of this shit's fake. He's not dead anyway. You see what I'm saying? So it's interesting the timing of that, and I don't think it's an accident. I think it's all a part of the psyop, because I think that because that video went so viral, and because they're openly talking about him not being dead in that video, that they didn't have any choice but to release some more fake. I mean, those pictures that show those X-rays could have been from anybody. Okay, there's nothing there that proves those are actually Epstein's fucking X-rays or any of that shit. None at all. That could have been from anybody. All that information they release is so easily faked and so easily contrived. There's no reason to believe any of that. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the fallout of that video from Luke Radowski has been them trying to now, instead of trying to reinforce the idea that he killed himself, they're trying to create the counter conspiracy and go, okay, well, yeah, this kind of looks like maybe he was murdered. So we want to get people, so still that placates the conspiracy-minded people, but it gets the conspiracy-minded people more on board with the idea that he's still dead. He's dead. You see what I'm saying? That's what they want. No matter what no matter what you believe, they want you to believe he's dead. Whether you believe he died by suicide or whether or not you believe he died by murder doesn't matter, as long as you believe he is indeed dead. That's what they're trying to reinforce. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, listen, y'all know what time it is, and it's time for everybody to step up, man. We're running out of time here. We don't have very much time left. We got to reach 100% of our operating cost goal. I can probably get pushed back to Saturday afternoon, but no later than that. We really need to buy tomorrow, but we just need everybody to step up and put in any amount you can so we can reach our goal and stay alive, and I keep working on getting these films out ASAP. Happy Halloween. I love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Folks, this is Josh Reeves, and I'm here to tell you about a fantastic website, FixYourGut.com. FixYourGut.com can help you take control of your overall health. Are you sick and tired of suffering from indigestion, acid reflux, bloating, or abdominal pain? Do you run to the bathroom either all the time or hardly ever at all? Do you forget things often or have trouble concentrating? Are you depressed or anxious? Do you have IBD or SIBO? Digestive disorders are increasing in frequency because of our toxic-laden, fast-paced world. There are billions of microorganisms that live in your intestinal tract that have more to say about your health than almost anything else. Learn how to make sure your gut has more of the right organisms to improve your health and enhance your life. FixYourGut.com has over 200 free blog articles, and it's one of the most valuable resources on the planet to improve your overall health and well-being. Search either Fix Your Gut or We've Read the Documents on YouTube for the latest health and conspiracy information as well. You can also purchase John Brisson's book, Fix Your Gut, or get personal one-on-one health coaching to help get you back to living your life happy and healthy. Visit FixYourGut.com, the ultimate source for all things digestive health.